Good morning, everyone. Welcome to BSides 2019. And we have a lot planned for today. And our first exciting speaker is Gene. Gene lives in Jacksonville with his wife, son, and dog. He's been doing this for about 25 years. And he has an interest in networking and small devices like Raspberry Pis. And Gene has a lot to share with us. So welcome, Gene. Thank you. Yeah.
So good morning and thank you for coming out. This is a much bigger crowd than I had last year. I think I had 8. Obviously a lot more interest in shadow IT as opposed to college hacking. So also quick introduction. I'm a board member of BSides Jacksonville, in case you didn't realize that Jacksonville had a BSides. My current job title is Security Engineer Risk. I've been a member of the Jacksonville Linux user group for over 20 years, and I'm a co-founder of the JAX 2600 and DC 904. Temporarily? Oh, yeah. Rather not get into that. And this is where you can get a hold of me. Okay, so a little bit of background about this talk and what issues I'm going to cover. First of all, what's shadow IT? And then we'll cover some risks of shadow IT and possibly some fixes-ish. And then I'm going to cover one particular scenario that I ran into as a systems analyst. And then I screwed it up a little bit. There was some stuff I could have done better, and I will be covering that as well. By all means, if you have any questions during the talk, feel free to interrupt me. It doesn't bother me at all. Just raise your hand, ask the question. I'll give the best answer that I can. So my definition of shadow IT, and I'm pretty sure this is kind of the industry standard definition as well, is the purpose or implementation of IT-related services without the knowledge or sanction of the IT departments. And this happens a lot more often than people realize. So the risks involved with shadow IT, first of all, the systems are really unlikely to be patched. I will be covering that in my specific scenario in a bit. Now, when I say limited knowledge of the system, what I'm talking about here is, say somebody has implemented a shadow IT system. And, sorry guys. Okay, so when I say limited knowledge of the system in question, specifically when I talk about the system that I'm going to go over, the guy who implemented it had been gone for years. And essentially, nobody had any documentation of the system in question. So when I inherited it, it was a cluster. No support and no securing of the system from the IT departments because they aren't even aware of the system. And again, no support if the implementer of the shadow IT system leaves the company. The system may never be upgraded. The system may never be backed up, and this is a major one because if it dies, guess what? Bye-bye. No more shadow IT system. And of course, lack of system documentation. Again, I will go over this when I get to that point. So possible solutions for shadow IT, you can try to implement policies that bar it. They're not likely to be effective. A lot of times the business will try to sneak around the IT department and go ahead and try to get something implemented. Noah, can you spout off real quick what happened in your case?
Website you want to buy some tickets? However, they did that without consulting the IT department at all. So they're contracted with live chat, all the licensing, all that. So IT, our response was, that's great. We'll install it for you, but you have no support from us. Any issues whatsoever, you need to contact live chat. It's in your hands. You didn't follow the channels.
Thank you, Noah. Sorry to put you on the spot like that. Something else that you got to keep in mind is if you do implement policies like this, they have to have teeth. If somebody implements against policy, shadow IT, then if they get, when they get caught, then either, they get written up or possibly fired, lawsuits, whatever the case may be. I'm not the legal department, so the more effective solution, in my opinion, would be that IT departments actually work with potential shadow IT implementers. Basically, the IT department approaches the implementer and says, hey, I understand you might be standing up something that is outside of, or you're trying to stand up outside of our realm. How can we help you? How can we help you implement this so, all the downsides of shadow IT, or most of the downsides of shadow IT, are not going to be there. You can also accept the risk, which a lot of companies do, and that's kind of stupid, but it happens all the time. So the introduction to my shadow IT story, this ended up being my capstone for my bachelor's degree. We had a team merge at a company that I formerly worked for. And about 2 days after the merge, one of the new team members calls me. He says, hey, I hear you know PHP. And I'm like, oh shit, here we go. Here's an IP address, and here's the root password, which was 6 characters, by the way. Go to town, have fun. Great, thanks. Well, the system was Linux-based, and it was a Linux distro I'd never heard of, Clark Connect. It's now known as ClearOS. So I logged in, and first thing I did was a uname TAC-A, and the kernel was compiled in 2005. Bear in mind, I got this access in 2012. It was PHP 4, which hadn't been supported since 2008, and Apache 2.0, which hadn't been supported since 2007-ish. And MySQL 3. So this thing was ancient. It had obviously never been patched. The guy just stood it up and, hey, PHP works, MySQL works, let's start coding. And of course, the code itself, written in PHP 4, had no comments in it. It was the worst case scenario that you can think of. So my supervisor comes along and he's like, can we get rid of it? So I did a bunch of greps and stuff through the HTTPD logs, and it turns out that over 300 people were using this thing in an office of 500, pretty much on a daily basis. So I contacted the sysadmin for that particular office, and I was like, if we shut this off, what's going to happen? And essentially he said, we're going to lose tons of man hours of work. This basically takes a job that takes 2 to 3 hours and shrinks it down to about 5 minutes. Yeah, so I can't get rid of it. So my first step was to back it up. The main reason for that is this thing was running on a Pentium 4 desktop with a gig of RAM and 160 gig hard drive, one hard drive. And it had been running for 7 years. So I had our cloud people spin me up a new VM in our cloud, our private cloud. And first thing I did was tarball the PHP scripts, pushed them up there, and then did a MySQL dump. After I did those and SCP'd them up to the new server, I also did a tar and SCP of the entire file system just in case I couldn't get something replicated to actually run the code in the database. So once I got the file system up, I actually just CH rooted into the old system and started Apache and MySQL, and surprisingly it ran. So at this point, okay, I have a working system that's not sitting on a 7-year-old desktop. Sweet. So the CH root gave us a little bit of breathing room, but I wanted to upgrade it a little further. For example, a supported OS maybe, supported version of MySQL, Apache. Now, when I took the code and I tried to run it on a PHP 5 stack, it crapped all over itself. Now, I do know PHP to an extent, but I also had another 150 systems that I had to support, so I did not have the time to refactor this crappy PHP 4 code into PHP 5 or PHP 7. So I ended up being stuck with PHP 4, but at the very least, I could get the latest version. Also, I loaded it up on CentOS, so I had SE Linux, which I ended up leaving in enforcing mode, which helps secure the system at least a little bit. So, 2 places where I screwed up. I didn't implement mod security. Giving the ancient version of PHP, I really should have done this. Also, this thing was only being used by one office with a specific set of IP addresses, essentially a 254.0, so 2 class Cs. I could have locked it down to just that office instead of the entire enterprise, and it probably would have worked better. But I didn't do that. So after researching this, I revisited this project as part of my capstone for my bachelor's degree. And I started looking at places where I'd messed up. I hadn't played with mod security in years. And I started messing around with it a little bit more, and it turns out that OWASP has a ton of signatures all in one file. They can just download, slap into the configuration file, and you're secured from a good chunk of cross-site scripting, SQL injection, those kind of attacks. So it would have behooved me to add mod security and the OWASP signatures as part of this project. Now, I bring up the Apache proxy simply because if you have a shadow IT project that, say, was based on IIS, for example, say you have Windows 2000 in your enterprise somewhere, then what you could do is load up mod security and set up the Apache proxy and put that in front of your shadow IT Windows 2000 project. And at the very least, it will filter those injection attacks before it even gets to the server. So and wow, this was short, but so my lessons learned from this project, plan better. I would say I should have done more research before I tackled this project, but I wanted to make sure that it didn't die before I had a replacement in place. Have better policies in place. This obviously you'll have to work with the business on, but if you have policies that basically say, okay, you can't do this, or you should be talking to the IT department, or the IT department reaches out and says, hey, can we help with this? Can we do anything to help you? And documentation. The guy that set this thing up, seriously, if I meet him, I'm probably going to punch him in the throat. Just there was no documentation. There was no code comments. There was nothing. But in my case, everything that I changed, everything that I did, everything that I discovered went into our team's wiki. So if anything had to be changed, especially since I'm no longer with this company, they at least have something they can start with. So any questions? Yes.
With lift and shift into like AWS or Cloudflare, is it getting worse?
I would say yes, because I've seen, for example, my current company, our HR department, went ahead and got some kind of cloud app through AWS, and then came to IT security and said, hey, we just bought this. Can you help us? Why? Anybody else? Yes.
They're not familiar with lift and shift. It's basically taking a Windows XP machine or 2003 system and shutting it on to AWS, shutting it on to Cloudflare. So basically, you have a non-maintainable server that's really now accessible to the internet.
Oh, that is lovely.
Oh yeah, but that's what I'm seeing. I'm a PCI guy, so I'm seeing more and more of it, like stupid old systems being perpetuated out on clouds instead of being local, and that's where you're basically running into a problem. And Amazon or Cloudflare will help you do this. They have analysts that will actually
Stop.
sit down with you and basically you're paying them, and sometimes they'll do it for free. People are yeah, they will actually they won't put it on EC2 because it won't run there, but they'll actually put it on a standard AWS or Azure, which is basically on all the time, and that keep the meter running because it's going to get expensive and it's going to bring in revenue.
Okay, so we had a question here, and then I'll get to you. So one of the things that, as an IT security guy myself, one of the things that I try to stop that thought of where you're going to get a no stamp. I try to instill a bit of trust into the users that would do this. And like I said in the second or third slide, if you can reach out to potential people that are going to do shadow IT stuff and say, hey, how can we help you? As opposed to, no, don't flip and do that. Yes. Yes. Exactly. And that's also going to take some work on our part. We've got to reach out to in my company's particular situation, HR. They are a big shadow IT entity. But I personally have been making it a point to reach out to HR and say, look, guys, why don't you just come to us, come to the IT department and say, this is what we need. And personally, I've told them, if IT tells you no, come and talk to me. And let's see if we can figure this out, as opposed to the big rubber no stamp. And I completely agree with that. But if IT security and IT isn't involved in the project at all, it's a whole lot less safe than if we are involved. And like I said, I mean, we've got to work on that just as much as they do.
Is there ever a case where some of these ancient systems where maybe more reliable to create a replacement that is more current versus what appears to be wrapping it in its own layer of security like you've done? What's the case for that? And cause-wise, what's the difference?
Well, okay, so like in this, hello. Okay, sorry. Oh, weird. Okay. So in my particular scenario, we were a team of 7 people, and again, we supported, 150 systems in addition to this one. Now, if you had given me a couple of months where I didn't have to do anything else, I probably could have refactored the code. But then we would have been down one person to support the rest of the systems. We could have brought in a contractor. This solution was kind of a balance between cost and what we had available. Is it the perfect solution? No, it's not. The perfect solution would have been shut it down from an IT perspective. I'm sure that would have pissed off a lot of people in that office. But, essentially you do what you can and you get management buy-off. And that's where we're at. Yes.
What was the function of the stocks investigation of see if something modern off the shelf could serve the same function? How much work went into that before
Honestly, 0. Simply because what this app did, it was based in California, and somebody would type in a name, and it would go out to 5 counties, different databases for homeowners, and pull all that data into one slot. I doubt seriously that we could have found something off the shelf that did that. I could be wrong. But, again, that rolls back to, we really didn't have a budget. I fixed this in not my own time, but, in my little bit of downtime when I wasn't supporting the other 150 apps. Basically, I did what I could with it. Sure, we could have, probably reached out to a contractor or somebody else to code this for us, but again, no budget. So.
Well, I'm thinking in that case, if it's pulling data together, we use like an off-the-shelf data integration app, that from hundreds of different sources of integration.
Well, the other thing is they've been using this for 7 years. So they already knew the interface, as crappy as it was. So even if we did an off-the-shelf thing, we still would have had to configure it to talk to the proper channels and then retrain everybody, 300 users to use the new system. So, anybody? Yep.
Really does help find those things a lot sooner. Because I found it way easier to fix the box and stuff yesterday, get it into the actual IT structure or maintenance, and then find the box that had stood 5 years ago that is critical that didn't know about.
And unfortunately, a Fortune 500 6 years ago didn't have that. So, this thing had just been kind of idling on the network, and people were accessing it via HTTP and putting in logins and passwords. So yeah, but I totally agree that an asset management system would have discovered this instantly. But this is where we're at. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
You said that they had login and password. Did it have like LDAP integration, or was it like hard set password? Was it one password they all shared? Was it?
Everybody had their own unique login name and password, but it was stored in the SQL database locally. Which actually I consider fortunate, because if it was using like AD login, then it was sending credentials across the wire in the clear. Yes.
I was just going to say one thing that's helped us a lot, and we consult on a lot of things like shadow IT, so I guess IT is involved. But, you know, if the business unit wants to buy a specific product, especially HR, talk about HR is for us too. You know, now we're in a world where, you know, that third party can manage that app
Yep.
on their own, you know, systems.
Going back to the cloud, you know, bust out a credit card and done.
They can respond to our controls.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the big things that we push for is like you need to get into our controls. And then, you know, the biggest thing for IT is just making sure, you know, the authentication is there. So we sign for everything. That's helped a lot. You know, single sign on to authenticate those apps. So if we can control those pieces of it,
Yep.
it's not as big of a deal as a roadblocks on your network.
Yeah.
So where we see that still is security cameras, security systems. You do retail, so it's like shop track systems.
Mm-hmm.
Cameras that track licenses.
Oh, that's fun.
Well, it's data that they can use to profile, you know, open their centers and how many people, you know, what time of day, etc.
Creepy. Yes.
So is there, I guess on-prem, there's a way that you can enact or something to prevent this stuff, but is there any kind of way that this could be prevented or mitigated and drive out in the cloud? If you drive procedurally or technologically, drive and become an IT?
Okay, so you can always make it a policy. As long as you have management buy-in, and usually, you can give a good enough argument to get management and upper management and the C levels to buy into it. Beyond that, I'm not sure if I do see.
CASBs, or is there a monitoring service that goes out and says, hey, somebody from Mason, or somebody from whatever company is bought this?
To be honest, I'm not sure. Booyah. Just to get that over the mic, basically what you said was talk to your finance department and figure out who's paying AWS. Was that a good summary? Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
I think I wanted to expand a little bit on what you said about your policies having a scheme. I know a lot of people, especially on the technical side, start to roll their eyes when you talk about policies. But really, it just depends on your language and how enforceable it is. So a lot of language in a policy, if it is suggestive, it is a weak policy. You need to get rid of it. It needs to have must do this. You have to do it. That is a strong policy. If you rely on a weak policy, you can't enforce it. You won't be able to enforce it. So that's one of the big things. I think for a lot of people here, having someone go out on their own, buy a service off of whatever cloud vendor, that is absolutely not something that should happen. But your policies are what prevent that from happening. So they need to be enforced, through a chain of command, CFO, whoever. But that's really the only way that you're going to ever be able to stop people from doing this. Because if they do go out and buy it, CFO says, I did not approve it, we're not using
Yeah,
You can have all the policies in place, but you're not enforcing them.
that's where I was saying that the policies have to have teeth, and I agree they have to be clear. You know, no. Yes. Right. Okay, that's a really good point, and let me see if I summarize this correctly. By going to the finance department and finding out that, hey, we're spending $1,000 a month on AWS for unsanctioned projects, IT actually ends up looking better because they're actually saving money as opposed to being a money sink. You're lucky. Okay, I'll just do that one verbose. Try to have somebody in your team that can talk to people. Anybody else? Yes. Thank you very much. All right, y'all. Have a good one. Thank you for coming.